is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Very good morning, and thank you so much for tuning in this Monday morning. You're watching News 9, and on the show we'll bring you all the top global business and economy stories that we are tracking for you right here on Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9 on News 9, and let's bring you all the top stories that we're tracking for you. First up, let's begin with the headlines. India and UK have gone ahead and stitched a trade agreement, and there's no news on the bilateral trade agreement with the US. But India and the European Union are now closer to sealing the deal on a free trade agreement. Diamonds may be forever and fuel may be gold, but smartphones are the #1 export item from India to the rest of the world. Bilateral trade battle between India and Bangladesh now swells. India has banned as much as $770 million worth of imports from Bangladesh. And after a $1 billion payout as part of Pakistan's bailout by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF is now posing tough questions and also imposing tough conditions on Pakistan for the next bailout installment. And after India pulled the plug on Turkey's Celebi, shareholders in the Turkish firm have lost as much as $200 million as share value wealth has been erased from the markets. And better news for Indian stock markets. There's a surge of global tailwinds. Foreign portfolio investors have pumped back as much as 18,000 crore rupees in Indian equities in the month of May. And Donald Trump last week had announced the one big beautiful bill. How beautiful it really is. It sure is big. We'll decode what this means for Indians working in the US and the money they send back to India. Former US President and Democrat leader Joe Biden begins his fight with an aggressive streak of prostate cancer. And in a bid to go ahead and steal more deals, US Vice President J.D. Vance has met European Union leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, to advance trade talks. The top story that we're tracking for you this Monday morning: India and the European Union have taken over another step now in the long-awaited free trade agreement. The 11th round of negotiations have concluded, with both sides agreeing to seal the deal in 2 phases. Now remember, India has previously adopted this phased approach in trade talks with Australia and is now applying it with both the United States as well as the European Union. The EU has demanded steep tariff cuts on items like automobiles, medical devices, wines, spirits, meat and poultry. It's also pushing for a stronger intellectual property regime here in India. India, meanwhile, is eyeing gains for its pharma industry. In addition to that, garments, steel, petroleum products and electrical machinery, these sectors that could become far more competitive in the vast European market if the trade pact is finalized. Now, India's goods trade with the European Union stood at over $137 billion in the year 2023-24, with exports at nearly $76 billion. The EU is now India's largest goods trading partner. Services trade between the two sides also reached over $51 billion just last year. Now remember, this deal covers 23 policy areas, from dispute settlement and customs rules to geographical indications and sustainability. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had agreed to close the deal by the end of this year, ending more than a decade-long stalemate, talks that originally broke down in 2013. And India's smartphone industry has officially become a key player on the global export map, surpassing petroleum and diamonds to become one of the country's top exported goods for the very first time. According to government data, smartphone exports jumped by 55% in 2024-25 to $24.14 billion, up from just about $15.5 billion in the previous year. Just 3 years ago, this figure was at a little under $11 billion, indicating a nearly five-fold increase to the US and four-fold increase to exports to Japan. Now, among the top 5 destinations showing the fastest growth were the United States, Netherlands, Italy, Japan, and the Czech Republic. Exports to the US soared from just over $2 billion in 22-23 to a staggering $10.6 billion in the latest fiscal year. Japan followed suit, rising from $120 million to $520 million in the same period. Now, according to the Commerce Ministry officials, this rapid growth has been powered by strategic policy measures, most notably the Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, or PLI, which has driven large-scale investments, ramped up local production, and tightly woven India into global supply chains. Now, Apple and Samsung dominate, which together accounted for 94% of all smartphone exports from India in the year 2024. Now, according to Counterpoint's Make in India report, shipments of Made in India smartphones grew 6% year-on-year, led by these global giants. Now, the momentum isn't slowing down. Smartphone manufacturing in India is projected to grow in double digits this year as well. That's the year 2025, with rising local value addition playing a key role. Staying with trade and India's trade with its neighbors, India has imposed new restrictions on imports from Bangladesh through land ports, impacting goods worth nearly $770 million, or about 42% of the total bilateral imports from Bangladesh. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry announced the move, acting on directions from the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, or DGFT. According to a report by the Global Trade Research Initiative, several key Bangladeshi exports, such as ready-made garments, processed foods, and plastic products, have either been banned from land routes or rerouted exclusively to designated seaports. Garments, for instance, valued at over $618 million annually, Bangladeshi apparel can now enter India only through Kolkata and Nhava Sheva seaports, cutting off access through vital land corridors and dealing a massive blow to Bangladesh's largest export sector. The GTRI also notes that this isn't an isolated decision. India's restrictions appear to be a direct response to Bangladesh's mounting trade barriers on India's exports to the country. Remember, tensions have escalated in recent months, especially after controversial remarks made by Bangladesh's interim chief advisor Mohammad Yunus during a China visit, where he described India's northeastern states as a landlocked region with no ocean access, a statement viewed in India as undermining regional connectivity. Now, since late 2024, Bangladesh has slapped a series of curbs on Indian exports, including bans on yarn, rice, paper, tobacco, fish, and powdered milk. It also imposed a transit fee on Indian goods moving through its territory. And days after handing Pakistan $1 billion payout and a bailout to Pakistan by the International Monetary Fund, it has now imposed 11 new conditions for the release of the next tranche, tightening the noose on Islamabad's hardly sizable and a very fragile economy. Now, key demands include parliamentary approval of a 17.6 trillion rupee budget by June 2025, energy sector reforms in Pakistan, and cost-reflective tariffs, which means higher electricity bills for Pakistani consumers. The IMF has also asked Pakistan to lift curbs on importing older used vehicles and raise debt servicing surcharges on power bills. The IMF staff-level report flagged growing India-Pakistan tensions as a major external risk to the program's success. If hostilities worsen, it warned the fiscal and reform targets could be derailed. Now, despite the military flare-up, market reaction in Pakistan has been limited. The stock market held steady and spread widened only moderately. This is the 24th time Pakistan has needed a bailout since 1958. Now, with tough timelines and unpopular reforms ahead, Pakistan now faces a steep climb out of its economic woes. India's move to revoke security clearance for Turkish aviation giant Celebi's airport operations has sent shockwaves through the global aviation sector, erasing nearly $200 million in shareholder value and wiping out a third of the company's global revenue. The shares of Celebi Hava Celebi plunged 20% over just 2 trading sessions on the Istanbul Stock Exchange, tumbling 222 points. The sharp fall has wiped out nearly 30% of the company's market value, dragging it down to just 10,700 crore rupees or so. The financial downturn comes after the Indian government revoked security clearance for Celebi Indian subsidiaries, including Celebi Airport Services India, citing national security concerns. Remember, India had been one of Celebi's most valuable markets, contributing over 1,500 crore rupees in revenue and almost 400 crore rupees in operating profits for FY24. Its Indian units, including Celebi Delhi Cargo and Celebi NAS, were among the most profitable, generating a combined 188 crore rupees in profit after tax. But operations at 9 of India's busiest airports, including Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru and Chennai, have now come to a grinding halt as far as Celebi is concerned, with major airports already relocating contracts to new service providers. Celebi's hopes for a return seem highly unlikely. The company also faces 183 crore rupee in pending loans tied to its Indian business, and its investment of up to $250 million in ground handling and cargo infrastructure may now be at risk of being written off. Celebi has approached the Delhi High Court seeking relief. A hearing is expected today, but with national security cited as the core issue, even a legal win may not guarantee the return of lost contracts or investor trust. Meanwhile, over 3,800 employees have been impacted, though airports say they'll be absorbed by other service providers. As coming to Indian stock markets now, foreign investors are making a strong comeback in India's equity markets. So far this month, the month of May alone, they've brought in over 18,600 crore rupees, continuing the positive momentum first seen in the month of April, when foreign portfolio investors or FPIs had invested over 4,200 crore rupees in 3 straight months of outflows. The fresh wave of FPI interest comes on the back of both global and domestic factors. On the global front, investor sentiment got a boost from easing trade tensions, especially the 90-day tariff truce between the US and China, which has pushed capital towards emerging markets, and India seems to be one of the beneficiaries. Now, before this turnaround, FPIs had pulled out nearly 94,000 crore rupees between the months of January and March this year, including a massive 78,000 crore rupees in the month of Jan alone. But the trend is reversing now, with renewed buying seen from mid-April and carrying over into the month of May. Domestically, the key drivers include robust corporate earning forecasts, accommodative monetary policy and sustained economic growth, all of which are helping restore investor confidence. However, while equities are seeing renewed interest, India's bond market is still struggling to regain traction. FPIs withdrew nearly 6,750 crore rupees from the general debt segment this month, though they did invest 1,200 crore rupees, almost 1,200 crore rupees under the voluntary retention route. Now, to address this, market regulator SEBI has released a consultation paper proposing waivers and relaxations for FPIs investing in government bonds through special routes like voluntary retention route or VRR and fully accessible route or FAR. The move aims to revive India's dying bond market, especially as global bond index inclusion raises expectations. Well, with that, we will slip into a very short break, but coming up on the other side, we'll bring you a mood check as markets open on Monday after a weekend. That and more coming up. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
Others see a teenage tantrum. I see you standing your ground. The world sees stubbornness. I see a soft, soft heart. I see you, my daughter, 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
When it comes to investing, quality isn't just a preference, it's a strategy. Introducing ICICI Prudential Quality Fund that invests in companies built on strong fundamentals with consistent performance, with an aim to give steady growth with lower risk to your portfolio. Now power your portfolio with quality picks. Invest today. NFO closes 20th May. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This is the tribe of your dreams. Introducing the all-new Skoda Kailak. Own your dream.
Skoda.
Is life transactional by any chance?
Of course. Everything in the creation affects everything else.
You are not only an actor, you are an activist.
Through my cinema, I've tried to always project what I really felt.
You tried to make women look beautiful for themselves.
The message to women was, let the spotlight of your life be on you.
You are fiercely competitive in nature, but you come across as a typical good boy that every mother would like to have.
But it doesn't mean you're not raging inside, or equally euphoric.
You have donned many hats, but who is Kiran Rao?
I am a speck and I am not even a blink in time.
From being somebody to becoming nobody is the first step in enlightenment.
Even now, I don't think of myself as a brand.
You still move ahead with your beliefs.
Winning the game is what's going to make this decision right.
It's a kind of a barometer that you have internally.
It was lovely talking to Barun.
It was great fun, and I think you'll find it fun to watch.
I found the discussion very thought-provoking.
As befits such a conversation, one goes back with more questions and answers.
He gave me a formula which I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, which is something that you'll have to watch the show for.
Watch Radico Presents Duologue with Barun Das, Season 3 at these times on News 9. News 9, English News, as it should be.
Back, you're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's bring you a mood check on the Indian stock markets as the Lal Street just opened 2 or 3 minutes back. Let's bring you what we have on the Sensex and the Nifty. It seems to be a gap down opening this Monday morning. Both Sensex and Nifty are down almost 0.18 to 0.2% or so. Well, remember last week was a fairly choppy week where we saw a lot of action, with last Monday seeing one of the most dramatic and historic rises on both Sensex and Nifty, followed by massive corrections that we saw on Tuesday. Thereafter, markets have been a little in the volatile territory, but more or less a flat next 3 days. What we are seeing this morning again is a little bit of a mixed reaction. Well, Nifty 50 has had a gap down opening. Sensex seems to be more or less flat, but the good news is that Sensex is holding above the 82,000 levels, and Nifty 50 is just kissing distance away from 25,000 levels. Remember, these are both interesting levels for the benchmarks. At least psychologically, these are good indications for the Indian stock market. Meanwhile, we are seeing the volatility, even though in percentage terms seems to be a little high today, but the fear factor in the Indian stock markets is low at just about 17.3 or so. Meanwhile, the small cap stocks have been the darlings of investors for the last almost 18 months or so. Now we are seeing a little bit of upward trajectory and traction in the small cap index, which is up about 0.7 of a percentage point this morning. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map and try and make sense of where the Nifty 50 pressure, if we can call it that, the gap down pressure, is really coming from. And again, it seems to be the IT sector which is dragging the markets down. This has been one of the most volatile volatile sectors, and despite some positive trajectory that we have seen on the Nasdaq recently, IT sector in India just does not seem to be getting the confidence of shareholders and investors. So this morning, Infosys is down about 1.1%, TCS is down almost 1%, HCL is also down about 0.6 of a percentage point or so. Meanwhile, all other sectors seem more or less flat, albeit a little bit in the negative. Reliance is just 0.2% down. Airtel is absolutely flat today. Remember, Airtel was also, Bharti Airtel was one of the stocks that has seen a massive 3% rise on Thursday before all those profits being taken by investors on Friday. And beyond that, well, no news really from the auto sector, so that seems flat. Maruti absolutely flat. Mahindra & Mahindra down about 0.3 of a percentage point. Meanwhile, Tata Motors is having a slightly better day today. Remember, the last few months have been extremely volatile on the negative side for Tata Motors. Tata Motors this morning coming in a little stronger, up about 0.8 of a percentage point. So that's the Nifty 50 heat map for you. And as markets have opened, we've got the Sensex and the Nifty in a bit of a gap down this morning. Well, that's the mood check on your screens as markets opened at 9:15 a.m. just about 6 minutes ago. Moving now to a character and a leader that we cannot stop tracking here on News 9, US President Donald Trump and his reshaping of global diplomacy with a businessman's touch. That's the focus today. Donald Trump has often been seen as polarizing and prioritizing deals over traditional economics. Now, as a leader of the world's top economy, he's approaching international policy with a developer, a real estate developer's mindset, focusing more on transactions than strategy. Here's a detailed report that News 9 has put together.
US President Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief of the largest economy and a superpower, is acting as the world's trader-in-chief. His real estate mindset is visible in his controversial development plans, and the businessman in him can't seem to move beyond deal-making, economics notwithstanding.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too.
In February 2025, US President Donald Trump proposed a controversial plan for the US to assume control over Gaza and transform it into a global resort destination, dubbing it as the Riviera of the Middle East. He suggested resettling over 2 million Palestinians and establishing US ownership on the contested territory. Trump's vision, if you can call it that, resulted in a production house creating an AI video of what the Gaza Riviera could look like. Trump liked it so much that he even reposted it on his social media, receiving a major backlash. This wasn't the first time President Trump approached international affairs with a developer's mindset. His previous interests included acquiring Greenland.
I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
Then, Trump suggested the integration of Canada as the 51st state of the United States of America. Justin Trudeau was soon replaced by Mark Carney as the Canadian Prime Minister, who decided on a visit to the White House.
I don't know, he's coming to see me. I'm not sure what he wants to see me about, but I guess he wants to make a deal.
Eventually, Mark Carney told Donald Trump in no uncertain words that Canada is not for sale.
There are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever.
But the real estate mogul in Trump is unrelenting.
I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, But when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be.
All this transpired even as Trump unilaterally decided to rename the Gulf of Mexico as Gulf of America and wanted to take control of the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
Trump's deal-making reflects in his policy-making too. He says tariff is his fifth favorite word after God, family, relationships, and love.
And because of a thing called tariffs, as I say, the most beautiful word in the dictionary, after love, God, relationship.
This came days after Donald Trump upended the known world order by slapping hefty tariffs on practically every country in the world, including islands inhabited only by penguins. And then came a 90-day negotiation pause. The real estate mogul, the trader-in-chief, then wanted to take credit for brokering peace between India and Pakistan.
We helped a lot, and we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. Just days ago, my administration successfully brokered a historic ceasefire to stop the escalating violence between India and Pakistan.
But Donald Trump's remarks have often been distant from facts, and his hyperboles have defined his presidencies.
They've been fighting for a long time. You know, they've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
And a deal with Pakistan will yield him more debt than profits, as the Asian terrorist harboring nation has been a failed economy for years.
As far as trade is concerned, Pakistan has a total exports of only about $30 billion and an import bill of $56 billion per annum. That was in the previous financial year. So even if you hold out the carrot of increased trade, Pakistan, you know, apart from textiles and clothing and perhaps leather and a few other items, it is not a major exporter. So even if you hold out this carrot, this reward that, you know, we will give you more trade, it is not going to take place.
If they have to play the role at any point of a mediator, or if they have to at least broker any sort of back channel talks, it makes sense that, you know, when it comes to press statements, these words are measured.
I think their history has been to try to be a little bit of a, I would say, fair broker between the two parties, and even now, I think their intent to wade into a conflict which would escalate right now seems to be low.
With Pakistan exporting just $5 billion worth of textiles, garments and leather items to the US, what deal is Donald Trump really betting on? And Pakistan has neither the money, the capacity, the capability or the political will to think business. The trader-in-chief Donald Trump should be read in on Pakistan's inability to deliver.
All right, and staying with Donald Trump. Now, if you're an Indian living in the US and you're sending money back home, you'll now pay an extra 5% on every transaction to Donald Trump and his administration. Now, Donald Trump has proposed a new bill in the US that could hit Indian families hard. The legislation proposes a 5% tax on all remittances sent abroad by non-citizens. This includes H-1B visa holders, green card holders and other immigrants. Shweta Kothari explains what this one big beautiful bill, as Trump calls it, really means.
If you are an Indian living in the US and you send money home, you'll now have to pay an extra 5% on every transaction to Donald Trump. US President Donald Trump has proposed a new bill in the US that could hit Indian families hard. The legislation proposes a 5% tax on all remittances sent abroad by any non-citizens. This includes the H-1B visa holders as well as green card holders and any other immigrants. So what is the bill? Known as the One Big Beautiful Bill, it aims to crack down on undocumented immigration and fund US border security. But the broad sweep of the tax means it will apply even to legal immigrants, including thousands of Indians, tech workers, nurses and students who are in the US. While the bill is a broader fiscal package and aims to extend tax cuts and slash federal spending, the proposed remittance tax outlined on page 327 has courted controversy for its regressive nature and direct targeting of non-citizens. The bill proposes a 5% tax on any international money transfer unless the sender is a verified US sender. So who's a verified US sender? To qualify for one, the person must be a US citizen or a national. That essentially means that all non-citizens, including those illegally living and working in the US, will be hit by this new tax. So what does this mean for you? Let's say if you live in the US and you are sending money back home to support your aging parents or pay off a housing loan, you'll now pay an extra fee. The 5% will be collected by banks and service providers and deposited with the US Treasury. Moreover, there is no minimum exemption limit, meaning that even small value transfers or modest investments in mutual funds could be taxed at a full 5%. India is the largest recipient of US remittances. In 2023-24 alone, Indians in America sent back $32 billion according to the RBI. If this bill passes, that could mean a $1.6 billion annual dent for Indian households. This added cost could shrink how much money Indians send home. That is a bad news for India's economy. Remittances are a lifeline for many households, used for education, healthcare, rent and savings. A cut in inflow could hit rural consumption and real estate investments in India. There's also a fear that this tax will push people toward informal or illegal money transfer routes, raising security and transparency concerns. With over 4.5 million Indians living in the US, the bill could have a wide-ranging consequence. It comes at a time when Indian foreign exchange reserves depend heavily on private remittances. In short, if you are an Indian working legally in the US and sending money home, you could soon be taxed for it.
Shweta Kothari there explaining that the One Big Beautiful Bill does not seem all that beautiful for Indians remitting money from the US back home. Well, staying with the question of taxes, will India's new income tax bill of 2025 simplify life for tax filers as it would for chartered accountants? And what really happens to the digital snooping rights that the bill gives the government? Well, that's exactly the question that my colleague Krishna Kumar asked Charanjot Singh Nanda, the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, in an exclusive conversation. Here's a short excerpt from that show.
Also now then talk to us about the new Income Tax Act. You know, there's so much of awareness about income tax these days and the importance of the job of the chartered accountants. And in that context comes the new Income Tax Act, which promises to simplify the Income Tax Act to the point where it is not only understood by the professionals, as in the chartered accountants, but the common people can understand it. You know, tell us how will it change the lives of both the chartered accountants and the people?
I'll tell you, it is the income tax bill, and ICI has been pioneer in driving it. We have 3 initiatives. First, to prune down unnecessary sections. There are close to 553 sections. We want to bring down them to close to 470 sections. Number 2, simplify, no jargons. Let an ordinary man who reads it is able to assimilate and use it for his initiatives. And third very important thing, to interpret the entire thing. Problems of interpretation lead to more than 70% litigation. So once everything is clearly interpreted, litigation will run off. The government, first of all, immediately asked us for our people. We gave them 5 chartered accountants from our council. Then we set up study groups all across the 5 regions. We have 5 regions: North, South, East, West and Central. And we made 2 in different, we made one in Pune and other in Indore. So 7 study groups were set up and close to 60 people were enrolled. And we were the first to be called by the Select Parliament Committee to make a presentation. On 6 March 2025, we made a presentation, and till now, we are giving them analysis of the entire Act, plus any area where we could be of assistance to them. So ICA is very cognizant of the fact that it has to add value, it has to work as a very important constituent of the nation and educate and make aware public of the new Income Tax Act.
If I can ask you, the new Income Tax Act also speaks about, in case there is a suspicion over somebody evading tax, then the authorities have the right to, have the powers to get into their emails and their social media accounts and their digital wallets if need be. I know your thoughts on that.
It is easier said than done. You can't just jump into the privacy. Yes, if you find that a person is evading tax, he's turning money into a different source, then they'll jump in. It is not something which is very rampant in your and my account, but they see a person is a perpetual evader. They find that his acts are suspicious. Then also it has to be done through a very senior officer. His permission is granted, and then they can only jump into the privacy. I understand it's a matter of concern for the citizens, but don't worry. It is only for those cases where you find that certain alarming things have happened. Normally, your life will move as it is moving on now.
Okay, fair enough. That's as far as income tax is concerned. Let's talk about GST. Every time there's a GST council meeting, there's lots of expectations and hopes that, there'll be a rationalization of slabs, there'll be more uniformity in terms of the nature of goods and services taxed at whichever level. Sometimes you find there's a huge disparity in the way different goods and services are taxed under the GST regime. Your thoughts on what direction should the GST reforms take?
When I think of GST, I'm reminded of a couplet which says, अपने हौसलों को खबर करते रहो, अपने हौसलों को खबर करते रहो, जिंदगी मंजिल नहीं सफर है चलते रहो. GST has to change.
Yeah.
And the best part common between ICA and GST is that both of us were born on 1st July. When GST was born, the Honorable Prime Minister was with us in IG Stadium. Chartered accountants did their every initiative to ensure that GST sees the light of the day. And even today, maximum practitioners are chartered accountants, and they give very, very viable suggestions to the GST Council. See, Council also has to receive the suggestions, put them into perspective, and then again roll them back to the system. So this is done by the GST Council. They are, abreast with so many changes. Some are reasonable, some are non-reasonable. So they have to have a council meeting and then take a call what has to be rolled out. And therefore, let us not be very worried about the council decisions. They will take whatever decision is in the benefit of the nation at large. Or somewhere where they feel that certain taxpayers are unnecessarily being harassed, they will try to bend that issue. So this will continue. It will see. Now people have become used to having, earlier they thought now it is come, every time it is coming, but it will perpetually come to ease out the systems and add to the ease of doing business initiative of the government.
Charanjot Singh Nanda, the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, there in conversation with News 9's Krishna Kumar. Well, before we slip into a short break, let's look at some of the other global headlines that we're tracking for you this Monday morning. Donald Trump is all set for separate phone calls with Putin and Zelensky on Monday to try to arrange a ceasefire and stop what he calls the bloodbath in the war in Ukraine. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warns of tariff threats if countries don't negotiate in good faith. But good faith definition seems elusive as far as the administration of the White House is concerned. US President Donald Trump tells US retailer Walmart to eat the tariffs instead of blaming duties imposed on imported goods for the retailer's increased prices. Share futures on Wall Street slump. Dollar falls as Moody's downgrades sparks concern over US economic policies. Former US President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer. We'll bring you that report. Meanwhile, China slaps anti-dumping duties on plastics, not just from the United States, but also the European Union, Taiwan, as well as Japan. Meanwhile, France is all set to announce a $41 billion foreign investment at the Versailles summit on Monday. Meanwhile, Vance meets EU chief Ursula von der Leyen and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni hopes to move forward trade negotiations. And South Korea's presidential candidates hold their first heated televised debate. Frontrunner Lee and opponent Kim clash on economy in the first of 3 TV debates before the June 3rd polls. These stories on the other side. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
Others see a teenage tantrum. I see you standing your ground. The world sees stubbornness. I see a soft, soft heart. I see you, my daughter, 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
How India's drones breached Pakistan's air defense.
The response of the Indian Armed Forces has been restrained and professional.
India responded by countering Pakistani attack.
Pakistan has grossly underestimated India's resolve.
Operation Sindoor was a massive success and impactful exercise by the Government of India.
The reaction of the international community on this particular instance after Pahalgam was to condemn the act.
Pakistan was unable to counter the Indian response.
We have gone about replying back in full force and full intensity.
Warfare redefined.
Pakistan has not only been exposed, their narrative that their air force is superior than ours, that narrative has been shattered.
Nature of warfare has changed drastically.
Misinformation campaign of Pakistan over the past 48 to 72 hours.
We are capable enough to thwart every attempt that is being made to attack the civilians, to attack our air forces.
The armed forces are giving an adequate and appropriate response.
India one step ahead. Every signal, every sky secured.
Hormuz could likely have been used against Pakistan.
It's a good face saver, if I may use the term, for Pakistan.
What more evidence does the world need when we're talking about Pakistan's biggest export being terrorism?
News 9 salutes the Indian Armed Forces. Smart, swift, unstoppable.
Welcome back. You're watching News 9. Let's bring you all the global stories that we're tracking for you this morning on Morning Brief at 9. US President Donald Trump has said that he will speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday about stopping what he calls the bloodbath and ending the war in Ukraine. The US president said on Truth Social that the call would take place on Monday and he would then speak to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the leaders of some NATO countries. Remember, on Sunday, Putin reiterated his demand that any peace deal with Ukraine should eliminate the causes that triggered this crisis and guarantee Russia's own security. Russia and Ukraine were unable to reach any breakthrough in their first face-to-face talks in 3 years in Istanbul on Friday. Trump had offered to travel to Turkey for the talks while in the Gulf last week if Putin would also attend, but Putin decided to not take him up on the offer. The president has been pressurizing Putin and Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky to agree to a ceasefire in the 3-year-old Russia-Ukraine war. Staying with the US, Donald Trump is also ready to go ahead with his earlier tariff threats targeting trade partners who, according to Washington, are not negotiating in good faith. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirmed on Sunday that tariffs at previously threatened rates will be imposed on nations failing to meet the US administration's trade expectations. The US administration, however, did not define what qualifies as good faith or when the tariffs might hit, but warned that letters will be sent to countries falling short with 18 key trade relationships under review. Here's the detailed report.
We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%. We had very robust discussions. Both sides showed great respect. The consensus from both delegations this weekend is neither side wants a decoupling. And what had occurred with these very high tariffs, as Ambassador Greer said, was the equivalent of an embargo, and neither side wants that. We do want trade. We want more balanced trade, and I think that both sides are committed to achieving that.
US administration there pretty much arm-twisting nations to agree to a trade deal or face the wrath of Donald Trump's tariffs. Well, Donald Trump has also lashed out at retail giant Walmart over the weekend after the company warned that Trump's tariff policies would force the retailer to raise prices for consumers. Now, Trump fired back on his social media post asking Walmart to eat the tariffs instead of passing the cost on to consumers, pushing back hard against the inflation fears tied to his trade strategy. The comments come as Trump doubles down on his tariff threats while trying to, on the face of it at least, shield consumers from the fallout of his perhaps ill-planned tariffs. And Wall Street futures slipped and the dollar edged lower on Monday after Moody's downgraded the US credit rating, citing growing concerns over America's towering $36 trillion debt. The move also poses a fresh challenge to President Donald Trump's agenda, especially his push for tax cuts amid mounting fiscal pressures. Listen into this report.
Moody's downgraded the United States' perfect credit rating on Friday for the first time in more than a century over the nation's growing $36 trillion debt pile. It's a move that could send ripples through global markets and complicate President Donald Trump's attempts to cut taxes. Moody's first gave the U.S. its pristine AAA rating in 1919. It's the last of three major credit agencies to downgrade the country. The first was Standard & Poor's in 2011. Moody's on Friday cut the rating by one notch to AA1, citing rising debts and interest payment ratios that are, quote, significantly higher than similarly rated sovereigns, though its outlook on the U.S. is now stable after it was changed to negative in 2023. On social media, White House Communications Director Stephen Jung singled out a Moody's economist, Mark Zandi, for criticism, calling him a political opponent of Trump. Zandi declined to comment. He is the chief economist at Moody's Analytics, which is a separate entity from the credit rating agency Moody's. Since returning to the White House in January, Trump has pledged to balance the U.S. budget. But his administration's efforts to raise revenue and cut spending have so far failed to persuade investors. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has fallen far short of its initial goals to downsize the federal government, and attempts to boost revenue through tariffs have sparked concerns about a trade war and global slowdown roiling markets. Left unchecked, such worries could trigger a bond market rout and hinder the administration's ability to pursue its agenda.
Staying with the United States, former US President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that has already spread to his bones. His office confirmed this on Sunday. Doctors say the cancer is hormone sensitive, which makes it more manageable with treatment, but the diagnosis raises serious health concerns for the 82-year-old leader. Here's a report.
In recent weeks,
former U.S. President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that has metastasized to the bone, his office said in a statement on Sunday. The 82-year-old Biden was diagnosed on Friday after having experienced urinary symptoms. He and his family are reviewing treatment options with doctors. Biden, who served as president from 2021 to 2025, abruptly ended his bid for re-election last July, weeks after a halting performance during a debate against Republican candidate Donald Trump prompted panic among his fellow Democrats. Vice President Kamala Harris took over as the party's nominee, but lost in November to Trump. Biden's physical health and mental acuity drew intense media scrutiny even before the debate.
We've learned again that democracy is precious.
At the time of his election, Biden was the oldest person to win the presidency. Trump, at 78, broke that record when he defeated Harris last year. Biden's office, in its statement, said that his cancer, while aggressive, appears to be, quote, hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management.
And moving on now, China has imposed steep anti-dumping duties of up to almost 75% on imports of POM copolymers, a key industrial plastic from the US, EU, Japan as well as Taiwan. Now, the highest anti-dumping rates of 74.9% were levied on imports from the United States, while European shipments will face 34.5% duty. Now, China has also slapped 35.5% duty on Japanese imports, except in the case of Asahi Kesai Corp, which was given a company-specific rate of just 24.5%. Now, general duties of 32.6% were placed on imports from Taiwan, but Formosa Plastics and Polyplastics Taiwan received lower rates of just 4% and 3.8% respectively. China's Commerce Ministry said that POM copolymers can partially replace metals such as copper and zinc and have various applications including in auto parts, electronics and medical equipment. In January this year, the ministry said initial investigations had determined that dumping was taking place and implemented preliminary anti-dumping measures in the form of a deposit starting from January 24th. And moving to Europe now, France is set to announce a record-breaking 37 billion euros in foreign investment on Monday as President Emmanuel Macron welcomes over 200 global business leaders to a high-profile summit in Versailles. Of the total 20 billion euros will fund entirely new projects. This is the highest ever for this event, while the remaining 17 billion euros was previously announced and has now been finalized. The French government also revealed plans to overhaul the country's struggling textile recycling sector. Macron will host several roundtables, including on artificial intelligence as well as energy transition. Attendees include South Korean executives, Mexican tycoon Carlos Slim, Stella Lee of China's BYD, and the CEO of Saudi entertainment firm Qiddiya. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance met European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen as well as Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on Sunday and said he hoped their encounter would help move forward trade talks between the EU and the United States. Take a listen.
Said repeatedly that I think Europe is an important ally of the United States. The individual countries within Europe are important allies of the United States. But of course, we have some disagreements, as friends sometimes do, on issues like trade. And we also have many agreements and many things that we can work on together. I think we'll have a great conversation and hopefully will be the beginning of some long-term trade negotiations and some long-term trade advantages between both Europe and the United States.
And staying with Europe, the European Central Bank could lower interest rates to just below 2% as ongoing global trade tensions threaten inflation and growth, according to Belgium's central bank chief Pierre Wunsch. In an interview with the Financial Times, Wunsch pointed to uncertainty following Donald Trump's April 2nd tariff moves, warning of mounting downside risks to the Eurozone economy. He suggested a more supportive monetary policy may now be needed, possibly including a cut from the ECB's current 2.25% deposit rate. And that's a wrap on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for tuning in, but stay tuned to News 9 for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.
Operation Sindoor was unleashed, launched a precision military response